All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, we're looking at must-add Week 22. As I'm recording this, it's Friday, NHL Trade Deadline Day. Obviously, a lot of moves have happened. Jake Guentzel moved to the Carolina Hurricanes, Vladimir Tarasenko to the Florida Panthers, just to name a couple. We'll be talking about some of those players in this video because there are definitely some guys that you can add now that I think have fantasy value. But look out for next week. We'll be having two NHL analysts come on the show and kind of break down what the NHL Trade Deadline looks like and what the fantasy outlook is for the rest of these players as well. But let's look at next week and see which are the best players to add to fantasy hockey. All right, so the first player we're looking at is Vladimir Tarasenko on the Florida Panthers. He's 61% rostered, so this is really for people in those 10 to 12-man leagues. And even at this point, as soon as he got traded to the Panthers, there's a good chance that someone in your league probably scooped him up if he was available, but still gives us a little bit of a platform to talk about this trade as well. I think this is a great move by the Panthers. If you look at that first game they played, although they did lose to the Philadelphia Flyers, he was playing on that top line with Barkov and Reinhart. That should kind of stay pat. I don't really see him dropping out of the top six, so regardless, he's going to have much better fantasy value than he did in Ottawa, because obviously with injuries that happened in Ottawa, you saw him kind of move around from the second line, first line, third line. I would be very surprised to see him drop onto that third line that they have, like Luosterainen, Anton Lundell on. He just, I think, will play better with Sam Bennett or Alexander Barkov, really centering his line. And if you look at people who've played with Barkov in the past, Sam Reinhart's a perfect example too. They're gonna have good seasons. So Tarasenko definitely going to be looking to pick up right now. 17 goals and 24 assists on the season. He'll have definitely some value on the power play too. This Florida team is just going to continue to roll through the East until the playoffs come. So a guy that you can add to your team that will definitely kind of help you for the playoffs and the remainder of the regular season. Right, the second guy we're going to be adding is Wyatt Johnston, also around 50% rostered, so kind of in that same boat as Vladimir Tarasenko, is only probably available in those 12-man leagues, I would say. And right now, the line that Wyatt Johnston's on with Jamie Benn and Logan Stankoven has been absolutely rolling over the past, I want to say, 2 weeks now. You know, you saw that game against San Jose. Wyatt Johnston had a 5-point game, had a hat trick. So obviously he's starting to play really well. And you've even looked before that game too. He's about a point per game over his last 5 there. And they're creating a bulk of the offense. If you look at the expected goals for and the share on that Stars team over the last 2 weeks, it's really coming from Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, and Logan Stankoven. So I think Peter DeBoer has found a nice little group here on this third line that they're playing. The Stars are running so deep, but this line continues to get a lot of playing time. Wyatt Johnston averaging about 17 to 18 minutes per game on the ice, playing on that second power play line with Logan Stankoven on the point as well. So I'll be talking about Stankoven a little bit later in this video too. Another guy I think you should add, despite the Stars only having 3 games this week, I still think that Wyatt Johnston is a guy you should keep on your radar and a guy that can, I think, really help in the fantasy hockey playoffs too. All right, the next guy to add this week is Alexis Lafreniere on the New York Rangers. Absolutely by far away the best streamer available. Now in a lot of those deeper leagues, he's probably going to be taken, but 42% rostered for the Rangers, a team that plays 5 games this upcoming week, playing games against the Devils, the Hurricanes, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the New York Islanders. You look at Lafreniere too. As long as he stays on that line with Panarin and Trocheck, I don't think there's really any reason to see this guy on your waiver wire. And this week, with the Rangers playing 5 games, I think that adds another emphasis to the fact that this guy should absolutely be on your roster. Over his last 8 games, he is a point per game, having 8 points over those 8 games. And then also a guy that over the last 2.5 weeks finds himself in the top 10, top 12 in expected goals for. So continuing to create a lot of offense, playing with a guy like Artemi Panarin really does that for you, but it looks like Alexis Lafreniere has finally come into his own this season. And, you know, I think for the next years to come, I think people will start to kind of take that bust tag away from him. He's been playing absolutely incredible since really joining this club. Through 6 games, he has 5 goals, 3 assists, 2 power play points, 19 shots over those 6 games as well. His shooting percentage is relatively high, but I think, you know, he's just been super efficient to start. That number will probably go down a little bit, but if you watch this kid play, you'll be able to realize that he will be a staple within the NHL and probably on this Stars team for the remainder of the regular season, and even I would think into the playoffs as well, as long as they don't add another forward to kind of bump him off this roster. But for right now and the remainder of the regular season, I think Stankoven is a guy you really need to look into at this point. Playing with Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn, this is like a perfect trio of Wyatt Johnston, a guy who's been in the league now for almost 2 full seasons, and then you have a guy like Jamie Benn, obviously a seasoned veteran, has been with the Stars forever, a guy who's continuously put up a lot of points season by season, and now kind of helping Logan Stankoven and Wyatt Johnston find themselves in the same category too. So a really exciting time over at Dallas. But as I mentioned with Wyatt Johnston, Stankoven is very much in the same kind of category in terms of over the last 2.5 weeks, creating a ton of offense, having a very solid expected goals for number, especially 5-on-5. And then you add the fact that he's on the point on that second power play line with Wyatt Johnston, with Thomas Harley. That line is going to be rolling as well. So Logan Stankoven for the upcoming week and the remainder of your fantasy hockey regular season and playoffs, I would definitely try to get. All right, so we talked about Wyatt Johnston. Now we're going to talk about his line mate, Logan Stankoven, one of the Stars prospects that's now with the full roster here. And he's been playing absolutely incredible since really joining this club. Through 6 games, he has 5 goals, 3 assists, 2 power play points, 19 shots over those 6 games as well. His shooting percentage is relatively high, but I think, he's just been super efficient to start. That number will probably go down a little bit, but if you watch this kid play, you'll be able to realize that he will be a staple within the NHL and probably on the Stars team for the remainder of the regular season, and even I would think into the playoffs as well, as long as they don't add another forward to kind of bump him off this roster. But for right now and the remainder of the regular season, I think Stankoven is a guy you really need to look into at this point. Playing with Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn, this is like a perfect trio of Wyatt Johnston, a guy who's been in the league now for almost 2 full seasons, and then you have a guy like Jamie Benn, obviously a seasoned veteran, has been with the Stars forever, a guy who's continuously put up a lot of points season by season, and now kind of helping Logan Stankoven and Wyatt Johnston find themselves in the same category too. So a really exciting time over at Dallas. But as I mentioned with Wyatt Johnston, Stankoven is very much in the same kind of category in terms of over the last 2.5 weeks, creating a ton of offense, having a very solid expected goals for number, especially 5-on-5. And then you add the fact that he's on the point on that second power play line with Wyatt Johnston, with Thomas Harley. That line is going to be rolling as well. So Logan Stankoven for the upcoming week and the remainder of your fantasy hockey regular season and playoffs, I would definitely try to get. All right, another guy we're going to look to add this week is actually Kyle Palmieri on the New York Islanders. I've talked about him really since Patrick Waugh has taken over for this Islanders team, and he's really played well since Waugh has been the head coach for this team too. If you look at more recently, over the last 2.5 weeks, he's top 3 in the NHL in expected goals for. So playing on that second line with Jean-Gabriel Pageau and then also Anders Lee, this line has really started to work wonders, honestly, for this New York Islanders team. He still finds himself on that first power play as well. And then if you're just looking at his numbers too, he had a 4-point performance against the Boston Bruins. That's obviously huge. And if you look at right when Patrick Waugh kind of got hired, he was almost a point per game, went through a little bit of a lull in February, but now the Islanders have a relatively easy remainder of the schedule, and especially for the upcoming week, really like Kyle Palmieri as an ad for week 22. All right, the next guy we're adding on defense is actually Cam York on the Philadelphia Flyers. We've talked about this guy in certain must-adds at certain points of the season, but I think right now is actually a really great opportunity to try to add Cam York. I know he did block a shot against the Florida Panthers, left the game for a bit, but it did look like he returned because he finished with 21 minutes playing time, so I'd imagine so. And if you look at really recently, his last 6 games, he's averaging like 23 minutes per game on the ice, playing on that top pair with Travis Sanheim. Looking at the last 2 weeks, he's one of the better defensemen at creating offense as well. If you look at his last 6 games, 5 points over those 6 games too. So now with Sean Walker over in Colorado, Nick Seeler on IR right now, it's really him and Travis Sanheim. And I actually think I'd rather have Cam York at this point too. He blocks a decent amount of shots, especially with Seeler out. I think that's going to be a guy you're going to want to focus on. If Cam York ends up getting hurt from this block shot, which I don't think is the case, I don't hate Igor Zamula as a guy to pick up. He plays on that first power play as well. He doesn't have, in certain sense, the volume in terms of ice time as Cam York does, but if he's not playing, he's going to have to play an elevated role at that point. And the fact that he plays on that first power play as well already gives him advantage amongst a lot of other defensemen that are really on your waiver wire right now. But Cam York for sure, 7% rostered, that's crazy. For a guy right now who has 20 plus points on defense and a guy who blocks a decent amount of shots, kind of does it all for this John Tortorella Philadelphia Flyers team. Really like Cam York. And the last guy we're going to be adding, 3% rostered on the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's not William Nylander, but it's actually his brother, Alex Nylander, who's been absolutely firing recently. If you look at his last 6 games, he had a hat trick against Vegas and is almost over a point per game over his last 6 games as well. 5 points in the month of February, playing on that third line with Cole Sillinger and Alex Texier. Really 2 young guys kind of in the same boat as Alex Nylander, is set probably at a little bit of an earlier stage of development than him. Alex Nylander also playing on that first power play line too, and you got to give the Columbus Blue Jackets a little bit of credit. Just knocked off the Edmonton Oilers. If you look at their last 6 to 7 games, they're top 6 in the NHL in goals for and 5-on-5. One of the biggest reasons Alex Nylander has really stepped up. I think his role will continue to get elevated as this season kind of winds down, as Columbus tries to figure out what the roster is going to look like next year. Obviously, you have those young guns, but is Alex Nylander going to have a spot on this team next year? If he continues to play like this, I think that is definitely the case. And for him, him, it's a good showcase to show Columbus that he is worthy of a roster spot next season too, and he's doing the most right now, playing about 16 minutes per game, as I mentioned, playing on that third line, who really isn't really a third line. I'd say they roll their lines relatively consistently, and then also on that first power play line, that's massive too. So Alex Nylander, I think, is a very sneaky play this week, a guy that also has a decent amount of volume for the upcoming week too. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of Must Add Week 22. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, look out for the video next week where we kind of have an NHL Trade Deadline roundtable with the 2 NHL analysts I'll be bringing on. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.